Well, welcome again, everybody. And we're jumping into the same general series of talking about major themes in the Bible. We're going to be doing a sub-series over the next few weeks on priesthood. And so we're going to be talking about royal priests of Eden tonight. And which, as you can guess, will start us right back with Genesis. And we've got movies for all of them. Well, 6-minute clips. And so we're going to start with a video to kick us off today. So I'm going to share this video. This is from the Bible Project. And it's called Royal Priests of Eden.
So, if you lived in ancient Israel, one of the most important places was the tabernacle.
The tabernacle was a sacred tent that the Israelites carried as they journeyed to the promised land.
And it was sacred because it's where the heavenly presence of Israel's God lived on earth. And the tabernacle had an important design to show just how special it was. There's the outer courtyard, then an entry room into the tent, and it leads into the center of the tabernacle, the Holy of Holies, God's personal throne room, and it's guarded by these heavenly hybrid creatures called cherubim. Notice, the closer that you get to the center, the more sacred the space becomes.
The people who work in the tabernacle are called priests, and they care for the sacred space, offer sacrifices on behalf of Israel, and announce God's blessing over the people.
Yeah, these priests represent God to the people, and they represent the people to God. So think of both the tabernacle and the priests who work in it like gateways that link together heaven and earth. And this is why the tabernacle was eventually brought up to settle on a mountain, because mountains are where earth meets heaven. Now, one thing that's missing in this tabernacle that you would find in every other ancient holy space are idol images that physically represent the God.
Oh right, Israel's God explicitly commanded them to not make any idol images.
And that's because in the Bible, all humanity is God's image. This is what we learn in the first pages of the Bible, where Adam and Eve, in Hebrew their names mean human and life, they're called God's image, which means they represent God in his holy space.
And that holy space is a garden in a land called Eden.
Yes, and the story is designed to show that Eden is the reality that the later tabernacle symbolized and pointed back to. For example, look close at the descriptions of Eden. There's the larger region on the land that's called Eden, but then within Eden, God plants a garden. And then in the center of that garden, God plants the tree of life.
The design of Eden matches the tabernacle design.
Yes, and there are details in the Eden story that are developed much later in the Bible showing how Eden is on a high mountain.
Because they're in a place where earth meets heaven.
Exactly. And God tells these humans to work and to keep the garden. These are the same words that are used later in the Bible to describe what priests do in the tabernacle.
So Adam and Eve are God's image and are like priests working and worshiping in a type of heaven on earth temple.
Yes, they represent creation before God, and as God's image, they represent God to all of creation. And they do all of this in this sacred space that's saturated with the life and presence of God. And so God tells them to rule creation on his behalf. They're like priests who embody God's heavenly wisdom and rule here on earth.
You could call them royal priests.
Exactly. Now, this whole setup, the royal priests in God's presence where there's abundance and life, in the book of Genesis, this is called God's blessing.
But it doesn't last very long.
No. Humanity is deceived by this rebellious creature. They're unsatisfied with being images of God, and so they make a grab at being God, ruling creation on their own terms.
And so God exiles them from the garden.
And God places cherubim at the door of Eden to guard the way back in.
This is tragic. Humanity has given up the role God made them for.
But it's not the end. The rest of the biblical story is about God's mission to undo this tragedy so that humans can regain access to the heaven on earth place where they can finally become God's royal priests. It all begins with a promise that God makes to Adam and Eve that he will raise up one of their descendants to rule over and defeat that deceiver. God says that this coming descendant will strike the head of that deceiver, but also be struck by it.
So this priestly figure will restore God's blessing by offering up his own life like a sacrifice. But this is still just a promise.
Yes, and so in the next story, we find the next generation outside of Eden. Two brothers at the door of the garden are offering sacrifices to God, kind of like priests.
Maybe God will accept these offerings and they can get back into Eden.
But sadly, one brother, Cain, gets angry because God favors his brother Abel's sacrifice, and so Cain murders his own brother. Then Cain is exiled even further from Eden and from God's blessing. And over time, Cain's anger plunges humanity into widespread violence.
Humans really need that coming royal priest to rescue them.
Yes, and that's the hope that this whole story is designed to generate. And so in the next few videos, we're going to explore the theme of this coming royal priest throughout the story of the Bible. We're going to see how the stories of Abraham and Moses and David all point forward to Jesus, who is the ultimate royal priest.
Jesus, the one who will restore the blessings of Eden.
So that all humanity can become the royal priests that we're made to be, ruling the world together on God's behalf.
And it appeared to me that there was only one tree there.
Well, they were focused on
They didn't
just
care
the
about the
one
other
tree of
tree.
life there. Yeah. Yeah. So any initial thoughts? Interesting philosophies, theologies, as you've said, Hannah.
Yeah,
I wouldn't,
I don't know
so
if I believe in them.
yeah, this,
Mhm.
so it's
It
one,
makes it so neat.
yeah,
Uh-huh.
it's one theme to remember that there's a lot of themes that are working throughout the Bible.
Yeah, this is
And
one stream.
every branch of Christianity kind of grabs onto different themes or highlights the themes in a different order of priority. And so as we're looking through this, to remember that as we're looking at each theme, that does not mean that this is the most important theme. We're just looking at different themes as we go through, and each of us has to figure out within our own Christian journey, what's the order of these themes? What's our life's priority in these themes? And it's not that the priority is good or bad, but we each have different ways of encountering God and different ways of being a part of the world. And so figuring that out, but also knowing the different themes makes it easier to understand and hear people when they come from a different point of theology than you come from. So that you're able to, even if it's a theme where you're like, this one doesn't really, I don't really get this theme. You can, if you know it well enough, you can understand somebody else's perspective in theology. So that's why we're looking at some of the different themes, to go deeper for ourselves, but also to go deeper so that we're better able to relate with others who maybe have a different perspective on Christianity than we have.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Mhm.
it really depends on how you define priesthood. I mean, it's such a loaded word for me, but I could see how it could have different meanings for sure. I mean,
And that priesthood is attainable by all of humanity.
Well, so what do you think priesthood is? How would you define it? There's not like one right answer.
no,
I guess, the part like they cared for. Okay. I think
Okay.
like all humanity does,
Mhm.
the offering sacrifices. I think the last time I remember being told to offer that up as a sacrifice, I was 6 and I forgot my mittens and it was below zero and I was supposed to fold my hands and walk up the hill. And I had chapped knuckles and my mom was like, "What happened?" I was offering it up as a sacrifice. So, like my understanding of what a sacrifice is and why would God want that? Does he want us to offer sacrifices? I think maybe like discipline ourselves in a sense. Not discipline, that's not a good word.
Every time you put someone else first.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or that you make a choice to come to Bible study instead of go hang out somewhere else.
Go to the bars.
Or
choice.
yeah, but
No, I know what you mean.
but at the same time, it
Mhm.
doesn't put anybody else like you make personal sacrifices or
Mhm.
choices or decisions.
Mhm.
But so if we are able to be priests, I'm just thinking out loud, so somebody else can.
No, it's good thinking loud. So I heard from your sharing too, it's a really loaded word. So it's not just what does priesthood mean, but is it tied with sacrifices? And what even is a sacrifice?
Yeah.
Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? Is it neither? What constitutes a sacrifice? What doesn't? This
I think
good
at the
questions.
beginning, I think of the video, I liked when they said Adam and Eve were of the priesthood because they were images of God. I like the idea of being an image of God. I never would have thought of it as a priesthood, but the priesthood of all peoples, I guess. Taking on that cloak. I don't know what word I'm going for. But
The magic robe of God.
yes, God shining through the robe.
The coat of many colors.
Yes, the priestly robe, which is not a real clothing, but a way of being, I
because
guess.
initially they had no clothes.
Mhm.
Right. So
Mhm.
I guess it's a metaphorical robe.
But they were doing God's work in the garden. Thought that's what I think be priesthood. You're doing God's work on earth.
Yeah.
Wherever you're at.
Yeah.
You're trying to just do his work.
And that's probably the simplest definition. To be in the priesthood means to do God's work, to care for creation, to be an agent of God in the world in a way that uplifts all of creation. Now, we as humanity have taken priesthood and put a lot of like paperwork around it.
Yes, we have.
And that I think that complicates it. And we have hundreds of years, thousands of years of baggage with what we've put on priesthood as well. And we see that starting in the creation stories too, when we have Cain and Abel, who are like fighting over who's the better priest. And God's like, this is not what it was about at all.
When did God actually say, you're a lot better, and so you have to start over again? I can't remember. I mean, did he say?
He just accepted one's offering.
But he didn't accept the other one.
I can't remember the exact
I think it was
word.
like favored one over the other.
Is that what the word translated? Favor?
And I just, what do you think about God as favor?
No, I don't either.
Well, and we don't have any of the context around that.
No.
Did the one that God favored, was it not about the sacrifice, but the thought that maybe that one gave it just with their full selves and their whole heart? The other one was like, I don't really want to give this, but I'm going to put it here.
Yeah.
Like maybe it was the method of doing it. Maybe it was.
Maybe Cain felt like unfavored, but it was all in his head.
Yeah, maybe it wasn't even true at all.
I don't know.
Or maybe it's a story that's trying to convey how humanity was moving from hunting and gathering to like in the conflict between hunting and gatherers in more agrarian society as well. And there's this conflict that happens between which is better than the other. Should we be farmers or should we be hunters and gatherers?
So a murder had to take place.
So
okay. Strong lesson. Interesting. I never thought of it that way.
So priests, we just boil it down to the simplest, as John has offered us, the simplest, one who does the work of God.
that narrator, he's Jewish, right?
No.
He's not? Oh, I thought he was the
He's a Hebrew
Jewish guy.
scholar.
He's just Hebrew
He's just
scholar.
a Hebrew scholar, but not Jewish.
He's not Jewish. He's a Christian Hebrew
Mhm.
scholar?
Yep.
Oh,
The Bible Project is written from Christian perspective.
kind of wondering how Jewish people saw priests.
Yeah, that would be interesting.
But okay, continue on.
Yeah, no. So
Okay.
everything from Bible Project is from a Christian
I did not
perspective.
know.
That's why they're pulling it all back to Jesus again. And
Yes,
again.
well, that they did. That's true. That's true. Was that one guy who wrote on the board Jewish?
Yeah, he was Jewish.
He was Jewish. I'm getting it mixed up. Okay.
Oh, when we yeah,
he
the
was
one
all
with the
The
history.
charts.
the
Yeah,
charts,
yeah,
the
yeah.
chart.
Yes, yes.
Mhm.
The chart guy was Jewish.
Thank you. That was really. I've not forgotten that.
Yeah,
Impressive.
He wasn't, was he born Jewish?
I don't know.
I don't know. I don't remember.
I thought he had a
say.
long history, like, he was an atheist and
Oh,
agnostic and this and that, and then he ended
if he said it fast. He said everything.
There is a Jewish scholar, Hebrew scholar, who is Jewish, who comes through town regularly, and
Yeah, that guy.
that
guy too,
Noah
he's
Almond,
Jewish too.
He's Jewish. So if you ever do have the chance to go, I would highly
I
recommend
think I
it.
saw something online, but I never saw him first.
Yeah, he has a very, very relaxed style. He takes off his shoes, he sits cross-legged on the ground, and he like talks from the floor, and it's a lot of questions. And the whole conversation is based upon what people's questions are, and kind of explores into that. And it's fascinating. He usually only gets through like 3 verses because that's how deep he goes in like an hour and a half.
Wow.
And it really takes the whole perspective together. So I would recommend. The other thing you can take from it is not often in Jewish perspective too, is that you would be in conversation and learn from the scriptures, like to question and to have an answer also means to like have questions too, and to have humility with the answer, that your answer could be wrong, and to continue to explore. And so that's a thing to pay attention to as well. So I'd recommend it if you next time he's in town, if you have a chance. So priesthood, Mary, you brought up sacrifices.
Mhm.
What would be role of sacrifice or not in priesthood? Like pulling it all the way back to how John said that it's as simple as and as complicated as doing the work of God. What would be the role of sacrifice?
I totally don't know this. Did they kill the animal, burn the animal? Did they cook it? Did anybody eat it? Or did they just waste it? I mean, waste in the sense of, I always told my kids if they killed something, they better be prepared to use it in some way. And that don't take a life from anything unless you have, figured it out. So I cook squirrel and raccoon but
Could have had your own TV show. Then.
Yes.
Okay.
Maybe you still could.
they could probably now. I mean, did people eat it?
So probably like a mix. So you take a portion that you would be burning, and part of it was the smoke. And it's kind of like when we light candles, where we see the smoke going up, and it's like something that pulls us to God. But it's also the smell too, and that the scent of it is often throughout the Bible. It says like it was a pleasing scent, like it was pleasing to God, and it ties it to like the smell of things. And so that's connected with sacrifice, where you're burning something which creates a smell, and you have a smoke that's going up, and it's meant to create like a thin place between heaven and earth. But also the food, it's food too. And we hear places in the Bible where the priest would eat what was being offered. So it would be offered, it would be used in the sacrifice, but it was also essentially like payment for the priest to eat, because they weren't hunting and gathering, or they were working full time in the temple. And so then the staff and the priest would be using that food for food. So both. Now, I don't know about every instance of every, because there's a lot of different types of sacrifices, and there's a lot of different levels, or not levels, but like acceptable things that would be sacrificed depending on your financial means. And Leviticus goes through that. Like, if you don't have a lot of money, then something simpler. If you're have incredibly a lot of funds at your disposal, something more complex as a sacrifice.
I went to a Catholic funeral, and I'm sure they were burning frankincense.
Incense?
Incense.
Yeah.
Wasn't it frankincense incense? When you smell frankincense being burned,
Oh,
wouldn't you recognize it?
I don't know. There's so many kinds of incense. I can't. There's many different.
I used to hate that smell. Now I like it, but
The whole town of Salem smelled like it. It's so nice.
The whole town is.
Really?
Oh yeah, because all the stores had such strong incense. There's just a lot of
Well, it
Which
smells like
stores?
incense.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, that kind of incense.
oh,
Okay.
it's funny. It's like the
I
town
mean-
of Hershey smells like chocolate.
It kind of.
You
I
know-
was at this Christmas market in Chicago too, and there was a lot of Indian things. And they had elephants, and they were breathing or they were expelling incense. Just so I've gotten used to the smell, but I don't know. There's lots of kinds. Monsignor Shea had his own brand. He invented a distinctive smell. I'm sorry. What was your question?
I didn't know they got to pick.
Yeah,
But I mean,
they do.
it was, the ball, the incense. I
Yeah.
mean, he heaped it in there, and oh
Yeah.
my gosh, and it's not a huge church. So it was around and around and around. And I'm like, well, okay. We're not offering this dead human being as a sacrifice. Why are we burning incense?
Oh, during a funeral?
Yeah. Is it like,
They just do it during large liturgy.
Yeah.
this
I
was,
don't think it's connected to the
and
dead.
I've seen it in Drake, in the Catholic Church, even before this priest. I don't know if it's just a ritual of the people of that community, but it's a lot of incense. And yes, I've seen it at Christmas, but
Tough for people with allergies.
It is.
They always have to leave.
Yeah.
No,
I don't
sympathy.
know the theological reasoning behind for that particular tradition while doing incense, but I do know that smell, our memories, and the way our brain
Yeah.
works, smell is incredibly
Instant
powerful.
church smell when you smell.
And so if you're using scents with worship, that can create a deepening worship experience for people. Just like, because it immediately puts your memories into a certain mindset. Like, have you ever smelled some smell and you're like, oh, now these memories come back of a
Oh,
particular
yeah.
place, even if you're not there.
well, I went to a cologne, Napoleon's cologne in Cologne, Napoleon's perfumer, whatever, and they were passing around all these different scents,
Is that a
and
store?
one,
Oh,
and one was, and it was a tour, like a gangster tour. It was a
Yeah.
perfume tour, and one was tangerine. We're passing around. There's like 30 people in there, and so they were passing it from one side to the other, and I was kind of like in the center. And at one point, they passed around one, and people are going, "Ew, yuck, oh!" And it came to me, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, can I have all of your sticks?" What I was like, I said to the guy, "I think this completes me," and he goes, "We'll talk later." Well, it was so busy, but it was like,
Yeah, why you're like one smell?
I
and
know, and
turned off
why now in my life, it seems like it was event driven, so to speak. I mean, I was in deep sorrow, and it was like, this makes me maybe want to stop crying, or I don't know. It was just like
comforting. Huh?
oh yeah. And other people, most of the people thought it was awful.
Wonder what they thought it smelled like.
Dirt.
Oh.
I kind of like the smell of dirt.
Oh,
Dirt
that-
isn't-
Yeah, I
dirt
mean-
isn't exactly bad.
Patchouli.
Patchouli. Yeah,
Patchouli.
that is a strong smell. It's
Yeah,
more
and I just
common.
thought it was amazing. I still think it's amazing. I don't know. But I do
There's
know scents
memories.
offend people. But this had nothing really to do with a memory, I don't think. It was just like, oh my gosh.
You just liked it.
Mhm.
This.
It's funny how that
And he
works.
said he was going to tell me something, but I mean, there was crowd after crowd after crowd. He's somebody who studied perfume. So I suppose I could ask Siri, but why do certain scents do?
Make you
You should have,
happy.
you should have gone back and asked him.
Yeah.
He seemed to know something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll talk
and
later.
Or was he going to be like, I have this $3,000 perfume that I don't.
Make
He
you
was a
smell like
salesperson.
dirt. You got it.
Well, and I've worn patchouli maybe a lot. And every once in a while, somebody would be like, that's patchouli, isn't it? And I'd be like,
Oh,
yeah. And
we've
then-
noticed that in the library, a lot more patchouli. And some of our staff
And it's not because I
have to leave. I
smoke
mean, they die. No, it's just a more common
or
scent now that people
chew
have.
or.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I mean, I like, what is that? Thieves. Has anybody heard of the scent thieves that they were supposedly
No.
thieves used during the Black Plague?
Oh,
And it was cloves, tea tree, and
sounds good. so far.
cinnamon.
Sounds like Christmas. There's a
It
Christmas
is.
smell.
It's
It smells like the Christmas tea I drink.
and pumpkin spice doesn't really do it for me, but
Interesting.
patchouli, I don't know. And maybe someday it'll be like, psh, I don't even like that. So,
That'll be it for you.
but so is it elevating something? Is it bringing, like when you said a scent evokes a memory, but does it also, Eben Alexander wrote the book Proof of Heaven,
Mhm.
and he kept trying to imitate the music that he heard.
Mm,
And some of it was, like during the service for All Saints,
Mhm.
when you rang the,
Yeah, with the bell.
Mhm.
Yeah.
mhm.
that was like, and why?
Well, that's like Gene shared during his testimony as witness. The story that he shared was that whenever we ring the singing bowl in worship, that it immediately reminds him of the sound of an angel that had
Mhm.
visited him when his son was in a coma.
And
At the
that
moment
angel
his son
said,
woke up.
believe.
Yeah.
It's a very specific memory connected to.
So
Mhm.
on All Saints Day, when you rang the bell, was it the singing bowl?
It was not. It was
It was
just-
a
it was
different
a
bell.
handbell. Mhm.
I thought it was the singing bowl. I thought you just,
No, Craig was ringing the
Craig knows, yeah.
bell. And it was one of the handbells. I don't know which one. You could ask Craig.
but I think this author, he died, became brain dead,
Mhm.
and he was a brain surgeon, and so they kept him alive a lot longer than they had planned. And then he came fully back to life, and his son was also studying to be a doctor, and his dad was a doctor. And he said, Dad, don't read anything, record everything. And he used his story, but he had specific images. I went into an art store in Bismarck,
Mhm.
and here was like this whole story. It was like he painted the book, and I said, when did you read blah blah blah? And he goes, I never read it. And I said, where did this painting come from? And he said, I was in a coma.
No.
What? I wanted to buy the painting and I didn't, because I was like, I don't have that kind of money. I
Mm,
wish I would have.
Wow.
Sounds like it was a powerful experience for you.
I smell Fritos right now. It's not a terrible smell.
And that's
because
not a
they're
bad
cheese.
smell.
In Chicago,
But it does
smells like
look
weed.
nice.
All of Chicago smells like weed, as far as I can
Oh,
And
All of
Melinda's like,
Chicago.
well, it is legal here. And she told me I was in nicer neighborhoods.
and it
Yeah.
smelled like weed.
I was like, wow, skunk. Oh, we.
Mhm.
It's totally legal there. Anyway.
Well, let's look at Genesis. So Genesis chapter 1, verse 28. And we're going to go through a series of verses and pay attention to what is it that humans are invited to do in these places. So Genesis chapter 1, verse 28.
Not chapter 28. Okay.
Mute. Helps. God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves upon the earth.
Thank you. So what is it that humans are invited to do?
My Amplified Study Bible, I don't know what version it is. Do you?
I think it's the Amplified.
Amplified version. It says, okay, it says, fill the earth and subjugate it. The word translated subjugate means bring into bondage. This harsh term is used elsewhere of military conquest in Zechariah 9:15, and God subduing our iniquities. Since this direction was given before the fall, it appears that the need to subjugate the earth is not because of sin, but because God left part of the arranging of the order of creation as work for mankind to do. Arrange the order of creation.
That's very hierarchical, isn't it?
Well,
That's
here's
just order.
Yeah.
my footnote's kind of interesting. It says this passage, because of its traditional translation, subdue the earth, have dominion over, has been used to excuse humankind's penchant for trampling the earth and subjugating its creatures. Unfortunately, the actual Hebrew is even more brutal, prompting traditional translation to soften the language. But this charge immediately follows the statement that we were created in God's image, that is to be like God. So surely the idea of stewardship and caretaking, not violation and destruction, is inherent in that calling. To be priests. It's interesting, the actual translation was brutal.
Yeah. In our modern translations, a lot of the language around bondage and slavery is kind of written out, but it's definitely a theme that's in Hebrew that's used throughout the Bible. And I don't know, like, that it's meant the way that we understand slavery. In this, we're like, historically, like the types of slavery that occurred in the United States and has continued in some ways, was a little different than some of the other types of slavery that has occurred throughout history, and that the piece of bondage, it's a I think in the Bible, as it's talking about it, that there's a total of giving of oneself to God that it's trying to convey, that with our understanding of slavery just gets lost within the negative, like just the ultimate damage that slavery has caused and continues to cause within our societies. But it's tied with this, that one thing that's interesting, it is a lot harsher in Hebrew. And at the same time, it's like have dominion over, and it's the same type of wording that's being used of how God has dominion over. And if we think of God as one who created and said, this is good, then what type of rulership would God have over creation? Would be a rulership that would pull out the good in that. And so even though it is very forceful Hebrew language, and does not have like wiggle room in it, the way I hear it is that it's trying to push humanity, like encourage humanity to be like, have dominion over in the same way that God would have dominion over, that to pull out the good in all things and never deviate from that, like to be held in bondage to good, meaning that like you would not deviate from that good in the way that you would be a part of creation.
This one said, act as managers who have the authority to run everything as God planned. And this command applies equally to male and female.
But how do you convince the people who think it means trampling the earth?
And
there's plenty
it
of
said
people who read
it
that
doesn't mean to destroy or ruin the earth. Act
But
as managers.
I think a lot of Christians read it as control, actually. Not necessarily killing the earth, but having power, I guess.
Well, the responsibility.
Mhm.
And that responsibility, like, my gosh, if God's got to take care of all of us. And so he's saying, manage things, don't give.
Yeah, I have other things to do.
Well, I don't know if he's saying I have other things, but it's like manage as I manage, take care of things as I take care of things, be responsible. Care.
Be priest-like.
And from this place, there's a lot of deviation in Christianity.
Yeah.
And because it is hard.
Yeah.
Like this is the way that it's said in Hebrew, it could easily be translated to trample and tread upon.
Yeah, so harsh.
Instead of like a managed piece. But a question is, I think it comes down to how do you see God? Like, who is God to you? Is God one, as you understand God, who treads and tramples, which to me doesn't make sense to create creation, say it's good, and then just tread and trample over it. Like that just, it doesn't make any sense to me. And so for me, I feel like we are missing something. So what would be a translation and understanding of these words that is more in alignment with a God who created and said, this is good?
Use things for good.
We have from this too, where we've got our splits in the understanding of what priesthood means.
Yeah.
That does priesthood mean as simple as do the work of God? And what is the work of God? Is the work of God to be like good managers, pull out the good? Or is the work of God to trample upon others? And we've seen priests do both things throughout history.
Well, and
the
leaders
priesthood do that.
I mean, if you put it in a military perspective, I mean, both my sons are in the military. And they say, this is my family, my band of brothers, but they're men and women. And they, the women have said to me, you really raised your sons right. And I'm like, well, thank you.
Mhm.
You know, that they stood up for them when someone else thought it was their opportunity to trample on them or misuse their authority. And but I think, you know, like they've been exposed to so much leadership and so many leadership styles, and they have in their minds, yeah, he's a good leader. No, he's not. You know, someone else, you know, like this person I would follow into battle, right? And why are they being hard on you? Or why are they expecting you to make sacrifices of building your body stronger? Why are they expecting you to eat well? Why are they expecting you to discipline yourself so that you're ready? You know, and you know, like the parable of the 10 virgins, where you're talking about, well, how come they just didn't share? And I was like, no, I don't think the point is why didn't they just share? The point is, are you ready? Because if you're not ready, you have nothing to give. If you're not disciplining yourself, you have nothing.
Yeah.
When the time comes to take care of things, you can't.
So what if we took it in this harshest sense, as Hebrews is saying it? So we have two creation stories.
Yeah.
So we have here, it's this really harsh language in Hebrew. And now let's go to the second creation story, Genesis chapter 2, verse 15. The Lord God, this is from the NRSV, the Lord God took the man, put him in the Garden of Eden to till it and keep it.
Mine says cultivate and care for the land.
Mine says cultivate and keep it.
Those are different, much different words.
How does this one sound different?
Well, you're definitely not subduing it, I suppose, but
Yeah.
You're helping it
you
grow.
work it and take care of it.
Justification for farmers everywhere. It's in the Bible.
But I suppose working, if you had a garden, I mean, you might do some pruning, which is looks destructive, but it's for the good.
It's for the good. Yeah. I'm getting rid of the parts of this plant that aren't going to produce.
Right.
Yeah.
So other parts can grow.
Right.
So this is very different. To till and to keep it. I've got a note in my Bible that it's related to the word aved, like to till and to keep it, that phrase, which means to be a servant to be a slave to work for, to worship. And so this is like, in that in mind, it would be really different. Lord God took the human, put him in the Garden of Eden to be a slave to it, to work for it.
In my Bible, I have this mention, because this is about cultural. It said, when people are assigned their function here, it's referring to this thing, priestly terms are used in contrast to the royal functions given in 128:29, which would be, well, and the royal functions are a little bit harsher.
Is 128:29 referring to the verse 120? Oh, the ones that we just read, 28 and 29. Chapter 1.
Chapter 28?
We read chapter 1, verse
Verse
28.
28.
Yeah.
Okay. I think he didn't say, here's a couple lawn chairs. You got a garden, hang out.
Mm-hmm.
That is not in either of these stories,
Right.
that's for sure.
You know,
No.
it's take care of this stuff. But also, I think in a sense, you know, and they said you're going to have to eat. So in order to eat, you're going to have to make sure this stuff produces.
Produce the land.
Let's jump ahead. Let's look at Second Chronicles, chapter 23. Verse 18.
Do that again, please.
Second Chronicles, verse 23, verse 18.
How far back? Oh, there we go. Second.
Jehoiada? How do you say that?
Jehoiada? Wait,
Sounds good to me.
that's how I'd have to look it up.
No, you don't.
Is that verse what?
18.
18. Okay.
Right above that, they're killing a priest.
Yeah, so this is we're in the midst of like the early priesthood here, and with the Israelites trying to figure out, so we've got the Chronicles, we're following the ancestors through here, and so we've got the care of the house of the Lord has been assigned to the Levitical priests whom David had organized to be in charge of the house of the Lord, to offer burnt offerings to the Lord, as it is written in the law of Moses, with rejoicing and with singing, according to the order of David. So what here is the work of the priesthood?
To present the burnt offering.
Present the burnt offerings. Yep.
Doesn't say much.
They
Oversight of the temple. So I suppose that'd be the oversight would be maintenance and
Yep. Care of the
And food
temple,
temple.
oversight of it.
doorkeeper. Oh no.
This-
Which part are you on?
18.
I kept reading and
Yeah,
There's new-
about the
new
murder.
7-year-old ruler. And it seems like the priest had something to do with processing him or something.
So this is a period when priesthoods are tied with the
The
rulers as well. So they have some obligations there. They have to do the burnt offerings according to the law of Moses. So they're in charge of knowing the law of Moses and following the law of
Sure,
Moses.
yes.
They're in charge of rejoicing. They're in charge of singing.
because David likes saying,
Yep, whether they're good or not, you gotta sing.
well, they might have, if you can't sing well, don't sing loud.
That's right. That's why you have more than one priest.
This-
Maybe they could harm.
So how is it, what's in common with early on and let's just start with what's in common.
Work.
Work.
Yeah, the oversight of the temple or the
Oh,
garden.
yeah,
Yeah.
kind of that, that's good. Kind of that care, this oversight and care piece.
Still sacrifice.
there's laws, like there was still rules with how to do it, even in the Genesis one, like don't eat from this one tree versus now it's a whole book of them. What's different?
Well, here it's situated in this one person. I mean, the one, there's more obviously, but certain people rather
Right.
than just Adam and Eve.
It's not all of human.
Yeah,
Right,
no,
there you go.
that's-
It's just a certain race or culture, whatever Levites,
One tribe.
Leviticus, Levites. Yeah, tribe, there you go.
And did the tribe then
It's
include the
hereditary.
men and the women?
So the priest
Just
would
the
be
men.
the men. So that's a big difference
Yeah.
because or in Genesis, it's Adam, it's humankind,
Mhm.
and it includes both men and women. But now in Chronicles, we're seeing only men.
Right.
So it's been narrowed, and there's a lot more laws with it. So there's definitely changes in here.
Yeah.
Now, how about, so if we go just a little back, still in chapter 23, 2 Chronicles chapter 23, verses 4-6. It talks a little more about that. This is what you are to do. 1/3 of you, priests and Levites, who come on duty on the Sabbath shall be gatekeepers. 1/3 shall be at the king's house, and 1/3 at the house of the foundation, and all the people shall be in the courts of the house of the Lord. Do not let anyone enter the house of the Lord except the priests and ministering Levites. They may enter, for they are holy, but all other people shall observe the instructions of the Lord. So what is the role of priests and Levites here?
So they were gatekeepers. What was the next
Gatekeepers,
one? One-
gatekeepers, and gatekeepers.
They're like
Okay.
defenders,
Defenders, yeah.
protectors. Or
So first was they're
they
at
could be,
different
they
types
could be
of gates.
murderers,
Okay.
kill people who try to enter.
Yeah, I mean, it goes on in 7. The
Oh,
Levites
right,
shall
sorry.
surround the king with each of his weapons in his hand, and whoever enters the house shall be killed. Stay with the king in his comings and goings.
So protect the king.
Protection.
Yeah, protection.
Yeah, because they're at the temple or tabernacle and at the house.
And now it's the king, not necessarily the ark.
Right.
The king is.
But the ark would be at the temple.
But why are they protecting the king?
Because one of the priests have commanded them to do so.
He's kind of he's like godlike.
So things have
A lot of
changed a
a lot
little
of
bit here.
authority. Yeah,
Yeah,
Boss.
bossy.
bossy. They've gotten bossy.
And they started to enjoy it too much. Some of them.
Mhm.
Who were the gatekeepers in Genesis?
The seraphim. What's the name?
Yeah, well, it's a
It's-
Hebrew sound that's near impossible to make if you're not.
It's a grunt.
It's a really deep throated CH sound.
Okay.
So you're good. Yeah, so it's not humankind.
It was mythical creatures.
Right.
Or creatures that didn't make it on the ark.
Oh.
We don't know that one, but yeah,
I mean, they do
it
talk
was-
about
it was the
dragons in the
unicorn.
Bible.
Yeah, they do. Don't see him on
it's
there.
like the t-shirts that have the ark and then there's the unicorn in the
Yeah,
water.
the sad unicorn. My God was kind of the gatekeeper in Genesis,
Yeah,
watching the tree.
they're watching the tree. Although they could still get to the tree. Still.
Or, yeah.
So-
Guardian, yeah.
So priesthood, as we're wrapping up, has kind of changed over time of what it means. And we're seeing that even just in this period of time from Genesis to Second Chronicles, this
Mhm.
change that's
Yeah.
occurring. And so how much more has it changed through now? And we're gonna go over the next few weeks, look at some of the stories of people who are considered important priests or important understanding of priesthood in the Bible over the next few weeks. See if we can get a little more information on that.
Very interesting.
So it does say that this
Mhm.
priest took 2 wives.
So they, well, I